Well, good afternoon and good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Buddhist Biohacker. My name is Lisa Gunshore, and as always, I am your host on this mystic journey that we are on here on the planet Earth. And I'm very excited about our show today, and welcome to everybody who's joining in the live. Everyone who's joining in the live, you can use your chat box to the right of your screen, which may actually be that way for me right now. But use that chat box, ask your questions. You can share your comments and stories. We have such a fun topic today, so I'm really excited about this. So I think you guys are going to love it too. And if you're new to Buddhist Biohacker, you can absolutely click subscribe. We would love that if you do that. I never remember to say that, so I'm trying to work on that. And Buddhist Biohacker is creating conscious content for 1111D. We take a stand against violence. We ask that your words, your deeds, and your actions all exude the energy of nonviolence, and we appreciate that as well. And welcome to everyone who's listening later on the audio on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Podbean, and more. And if you are listening later and you'd like to join in the discussion, you can join us on MeWe.com. That's MEWE.com. They are a social media platform that has a privacy bill of rights, and we have the Buddhist Biohacker Forum there where you can share your comments and stories and experiences and questions there with all of us that are part of the Buddhist Biohacker community. Okay, so enough of all of that. Welcome to everybody who's joining. We have a really incredible topic today, which is paranormal communication. And we have this topic because we have a really incredible guest, Patrick Keller, who has his own YouTube channel, has his own show, and I'm super excited to have him here. So welcome, Patrick, to the show.
Thank you for inviting me on the show. I am so super excited to nerd out in this forum.
Yes, me too. And I want to start out, I just want you to share who you are and what you've been doing with everybody so that they can connect in with what you're all about. And then I'm so excited to dive into all the paranormal stuff because it's just way too much fun. So
Sweet. You're right. It is fun. Well, my name is Patrick Keller, and I am an educator, getting ready to start my 19th year being a middle school music teacher. But I also happen to be a paranormal nerd, what the listeners and followers of my content know as a paranerd. We refer to ourselves as that all the time, and we love that. This all started for me with what I called my spiritual shift, which started probably 12, 13 years ago at this point. I didn't really have a lot of experiences growing up. I didn't have this big like aha moment. A lot of people talk about, some ghost experience they had, or maybe they even had some powerful experience like an NDE or something that led them down this journey. I don't have anything massive like that. For me, it all started with a book, and even though it's really nerdy, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, even though I kind of am, Ghost Hunters, the television show Ghost Hunters, and a book combined together started me on this journey of reading. And I read like a book a week on spiritual topics for like a year, and I still read a lot. I certainly don't read one book a week, but that whole, uh, you know, craving information that people talk about having when they are starting this enlightenment journey. That sounded really dumb and pretentious. I didn't mean that, but I mean like you know what I'm saying? It's you just crave information, and I hit it hard. And so from there, I started a paranormal investigation team for several years, which was basically my family, and researched a lot. I've done a lot of experimenting with electronic voice phenomenon, EVP. And then I needed a place because there wasn't a lot of people in my world who enjoyed talking about woo-woo paranormal things. I needed a place to express what I was learning. And so I started a blog, Big Séance. And 2 years later, I birthed something new, and the blog kind of changed into a podcast in 2014. And so that's where that came in, the Big Séance podcast. And we focus a lot on spirit communication, hauntings, psychics and mediums for sure, because I'm a sucker for any kind of psychic medium content. Not a psychic medium myself. I do like to experiment with a lot of things, and I fail at a lot of those things. Um, and so I'm not an expert at anything. I think a lot of my listeners see me as them, the average person that's just asking questions and sometimes worries about sounding like a dork, but definitely is passionate and interested in everything that, you know, this niche, this field, this whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? That's me.
I, I love it. I love it. So you've said so much terminology, and I know that some people are probably super into it, and then some people are like, "What the heck is he talking about?" So I want to dive into it because it's super awesome. So, I mean, we could talk. So you talked about EVPs, you talk about NDEs. You're like throwing out all this stuff, and I love it because I don't know a medium that hasn't gone out and like done all of the paranormal investigation stuff and ghost hunted. And so you're making me smile with the ghost hunters, because I watched that too. It was fascinating to see, like, well, what do they think and what do they believe? And as a psychic medium, I can tell you there were some times when they were debunking stuff that I'm like, why are you debunking that? I had those moments for sure where I'm like, that's not debunked. Like, you guys are, I don't know. But they're so fun to watch. I can't remember the last time I've watched one, actually. So that makes me think I should. But I want to talk about all of this. But I think let's start with, you said your blog's is called Big Séance, and I want to talk about this idea of seance, and I want to talk about what an EVP is for folks who don't know what that is. We'll start there. We'll get into the NDE stuff later, but I want to start with what you think, because I've held seances, I've done all of those things, and so I would love to hear like what your thoughts are about it today, what you feel the definition of a seance even is, and what you've learned like through all of your study and research and your own investigative process.
Oh, excellent. A seance to me, well, let me back up. I am very interested in spiritualism. And when I first started looking into all of this and reading, that vision kept popping up in my head, whether it be the Fox sisters, or even if it just the kind of in popular culture, what a seance is, with the flamboyant medium in a, old Victorian parlor that's dark and bookshelves and dusty books and candles. And, that to me is the most delicious environment one could be in. And so it started out with just, I guess kind of a metaphor for our search for answers and wanting to learn more about the other side. But then as I gained experience and as I kind of figured out what my blog and my podcast was and what listeners wanted from me, I realized that I consider everything that I do a seance almost. An EVP session, which we'll talk about, reaching out and asking questions of spirits or the other side, or sitting down at a Ouija board, which I know may be controversial, but doing something like that, or praying or meditating or communicating with a spirit guide. To me, that is all a seance. A paranormal investigation could be a seance. And so, whereas I have only been in actually a few seances, literally in the traditional form, um, I wish I was invited to some cool ones. That would be awesome. Uh, I think everything I'm interested in is a seance, and I do like to create that ambiance and that atmosphere in my show and in my branding. And it's funny because just recently, I think I upset a few of my listeners, not really, but kind of, because I posted some behind the scenes photos of my studio, because I made the joke that everybody on social media always presents the perfect side of them and everybody is perfect and no one wants to put their flaws out there, and that is not me. And because I know that when I get into my show with the music and the sound effects, I've kind of painted this picture of the parlor. So we're always in the parlor, the big seance parlor. And every show starts out with people walking up, and you can hear the footsteps and the fall leaves rustling across the sidewalk and the music and lighting the candles. And I didn't really think about that when I posted it. I posted a picture of my messy studio here on the other side of this camera. And it was like, oh no, you ruined the magic for me. You mean you're not sitting in in a seance parlor? And it was funny, but I was like, I didn't realize how much people needed that and
Yeah.
depended on that when they listened to my show. And so that makes me feel like I've done my job well, because I really want people to be in that place when they listen to my show.
Oh, that's so cool. I love what you're saying about everything being a seance, because it's so true. And did you know that Abraham Lincoln used to do seances in the White House?
I've heard that often, and I never knew if it how much of that was true, but I've heard that and I love that. And his wife was very interested in it as well.
Yep, absolutely. And there's actually, I'll have to find the links for you and for our viewers, because there's actually some documentaries that where they talk about it. And they talk about, because one of their children had died.
Right.
And so a lot of it was them communicating with their child that had died, but who the heck knows? But yes, in the White House, they did seances. I have a great story for you, because I went to New Orleans and we went for Jazz Fest, but kind of wherever I travel, I always think if there's a place to do my work, I do it. So I had connected with this really great metaphysical space in Metairie in New Orleans, and did a medium event there. So I actually did a group event where I spoke to people who passed away. There was probably, I don't know, there's probably 20 people there maybe, while we were in New Orleans. And it was just something for me that I really wanted to do. I'm like, I really want to do this in New Orleans. Like, of all the places that have such a seated metaphysical and occult community. And so I did this event, did this medium event, and it was really amazing and great and beautiful and all those things, you know. And then afterwards, the owner said to me, she goes, "Do you want to see our room?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?"
Shut up.
Yes. And so it was so awesome. So she opens this door, and there's this, like, it's a pretty small room, probably the size of my office here. I mean, it was just, 400 by 400 feet or whatever, a small room. But in the center was this gigantic round oak table. And she said, "Lift this table." And it was like heavy. And she's like, "This table," she said, "does table tipping like you would not believe." And she's like, "It has been all over this room. It's been up and down and back and forth. And it's this massive, heavy table." So here I was in New Orleans in this like secret room with this gigantic table where they did all of this stuff. And it was just the coolest thing ever. Cause I don't know, have you table tipped? Have you done that yet?
I have not. I have a past guest who's been on a few times, who has become a good friend, who is a huge voice in the table tipping community in Australia,
Oh,
in
that's cool.
Reykjavik. And I hear a lot about table tipping from her. It's becoming really big there.
It's pretty wild. I can tell you, I used to do seances back in the day. And I say back in the day because I started working with the public in 2005, 2006, like right at the end of 2005, and then really officially opened my space in July of 2006. But back then, things are so much more open now, don't you think? Like,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the the whole idea of metaphysics and ghosts and spirits and whatever you want to call them, like it's much bigger. So back then I felt like the community, when I look back, I think of it as a much smaller community. And so we did a lot of more kind of like woo-woo stuff, I think, than gets done these days, right? Because we're all focusing on ascension, and we forget to have fun with all that little stuff. But I'll tell you what, Walmart sells of all the places, God, but Walmart sells these like little round tables for like $10. They're like little wood tables. They have the 3 legs, you know?
Uh-huh.
You guys go get those and table tip. I mean, those will table tip no problem. They're super light, they're round and they're little. And if you guys haven't table tipped, you put your fingers on it and it moves. And you can even, you know, does your friend that's an expert, do they do all the letters and everything with the table tipping, or what do they do?
I'm not sure on that. I know that they have quite a few. They do a lot of tours and they guide a lot of people through table tipping, and invite people into their world of table tipping. And so there are a lot of videos out there. I don't know any more than that. I've watched a few, but it looks fascinating.
Well, yeah, you could get all crazy with it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
much like a Ouija board where you could
Uh-huh.
really get like in where 3 taps is C and 5
Mhm.
taps on this side's F and all that stuff. I didn't get into that. I just wanted to let them like kind of move the thing around. We already have comments and questions. I love you guys. So if you're in the audience, you can absolutely use this live chat, which is what you're doing. But I'm going to kind of break in because I actually have some good comments and questions here. So
Neat.
yeah, the Colorado herbalist says, I'm super into it, exclamation point. She says, I go on investigations and I am a member of Kindred Spirit Society of the Rockies. So that's super cool. Ooh, that gives me goosebumps. And then Mind Wide Open now says, do you think intention is important when working with the paranormal? What a great question. What do you think about that?
I think so. That is one thing I often, and again, I'm not an expert in anything, but I often field questions about, well, how can you tell who you're communicating with, and what if it's a demon, and what if it's a negative? And my feeling is, first of all, I don't know that I believe in those things. I don't necessarily know that I believe in there being a demons, or to me that's a very dogmatic kind of view of things. But I do know that there, it could be negative, just like you have negative people in the world and there might be negative spirits. But my comeback to that, to some people, and I know this isn't directly the question that was asked, but
Yeah.
my response to that is, most of the time when I reach out to communicate with spirit, nothing happens. Most of the time when I'm on the Ouija board, nothing happens. And so when things do happen, they certainly have not been something that comes out of the depths of hell. And so, but I also don't, if I'm not feeling like I'm in a good place, obviously don't put yourself there. And if you do, I think most of the experiences that people have, especially with the Ouija board or with negativity with the paranormal, a lot of those experiences go back to being a teenager or being at a party, or, who knows if alcohol was involved. I can't trust a lot of people in my daily life regularly. How are you going to trust everybody that might have had their hands on that planchette with you? Like, don't just think that, yep, it was negative and that was it. Because, yeah, I mean, what kind of frame of mind were you in that moment at that party or at that social gathering or whatever? But yeah, I do believe in intentions. And which I've slowed down on my experimenting too. I'm not constantly asking to talk to spirit and breaking out my tools and gadgets. But when I do tend to at least clear my thoughts and light a candle and breathe and, hum. All the negative, Facebook scrolling of my day. I have to like release all of that. And sometimes I meditate or have a prayer, ask for help from my guides or whoever might be there, and then jump in. And nothing ever flies across the room and things like that. That's what I would say. But intention, yes.
Yeah, I think I love your answer because, yeah, it's about your intentions. But I also agree with you, Patrick. I mean, we're on the same bus as far as I don't really believe that there's like, we're fooling ourselves if we think there's not shadow, but
Right.
or negativity. But I don't really believe in the whole devil demon kind of thing either. I really think, there's people that are really, grouchy and angry and violent and destructive in this world. And there's people who are really light. And when they pass out of their bodies, they're still in those filters. You don't necessarily self-realize when you leave your body. That's not how it works. And so it is like dealing with regular people. They just don't have linear three-dimensional bodies. I mean, it's really that simple, I think. And so, yeah, it's about intention, and it's about what who you want to connect with, and what kind of information you're looking for. If you're looking for something dramatic, you're going to probably get what you asked for, and that may be more on the negative side. But I think it's important to know that it's universal law that you're senior in your space. So if you are going on an investigation or you are connecting with spirit, they cannot do anything to you unless you allow them. So when you hear those stories of things happening to people, somehow there's a contractual agreement that's been made that they've allowed that spirit or being to connect with them. It's not necessarily, you just can't, you're just in charge. That's universal law, being in a human body. So when you're in a room, if you're clearing a house, if you're doing an investigation, if you're, feel like you're connecting to some kind of spirit energy, you can tell them to leave if you don't want them there, just as much as you can welcome them in if they want to be a part of your space. And just like you said, sometimes things don't happen because they don't want to be a part of it. And that's okay too. Like, it's so true. I want to talk about your investigations, but I want to go back to the EVPs because that is so important and fun, you guys. So explain what the EVPs are, and I want to hear some of your good stories because I know you got them.
Okay, yeah. So EVP is electronic voice phenomenon, singular, or electronic voice phenomena, plural, and or just their presumed spirit voices. And as I jump into this, you have to know that I am also very skeptic of EVP, equally as I am supportive of them and look for them. But they're not super common, I believe. I don't think they're as common as people say they are. I do think that probably, just like having intuitive abilities and having different strengths, I think some people probably get EVP samples more than others. And that might be why I don't tend to have a lot. But I also hear a lot of things that at the beginning I think could be voices that get kind of thrown out, kind of tossed out in my mind, or written off or debunked, But EVP kind of really started in the way we think of as EVP and spirit voices in the 1960s. And I'm not going to have all of my facts straight off the top of my head, but a woman named Sarah Estep is the first American pioneer. Really, there were a lot of like Swedish researchers before that, and but Sarah Estep was this awesome woman who really jumped into this idea of doing research and communicating and reaching out through recordings. And when she started, it would have been, the two whatever they called that, old school tape recordings and on reels. And she started out recording daily and asking questions and getting answers. And she wrote a few books about it. She started the American Association of EVP, and there are associations around the world. And that has since been handed off to a couple named Tom and Lisa Butler, who run it now, although now it's called Association Transcommunication, and it's open to lots of different forms of electronic communication, which they call ITC, another acronym for you. But I took her inspiration and I don't know how many years ago it was now, but I did a pretty in-depth 2-week EVP experiment over a spring break that I had from teaching, and drove my husband nuts and spent hours and hours every day recording audio, having a little seance, really doing a meditation, trying different techniques, trying background noise, trying white noise, trying a spirit box with it, which is something else you might want to bring up. And um, not always getting stuff, but after about 12, 13 days, suddenly things started coming through. And that's the same thing that happened with Sarah. In fact, almost the same day of my experiments as Sarah's experiments is when I first started getting little voices, or what I assume are voices. I will never flat out say that they're paranormal or they're voices. And then the 13th day, I think it is, of my 2 weeks, I started getting communication from what I've always referred to as my rapper, like not Tupac, but like knocking. And to me, it was, a person gets used to their environment and what their house sounds like, and the taps and pops and
Yeah.
creaks. And this was something more. And it blew me away, and it was incredibly cool. It was obvious that it was not just creeks. And 2 days later, I think my rapper returned. I invited them. I was like, please come back. And then I think a week or two later, there was one more visit. There were like 3 different visits where it was significant. And I don't play the recordings very often because I honestly get so excited and I sound like a little girl and I'm like squealing and freaking out. But it was really, really, really cool. But that's EVP. A couple of the EVP I have, like the first EVP we have from our paranormal investigation group was from a church who was open to us coming in and investigating some of their experiences, which is very uncommon, by the way. And a really clear presumed EVP of someone saying it's all over me. There's some people think it could say different things, but that's how I think of it. At
Mhm.
first, we thought it might say this is Paul or something like that. So and that's well documented on my site, so people can listen to that. I also have a really cool a recording of an EVP session that I did with the Ouija board and the spirit box at the same time. So I'm recording my audio, and I have a spirit box, which is, like a basic radio that is scrolling very quickly through all the frequencies and the radio stations, just allowing bits of sound.
Oh, interesting.
And
What's the point of that?
well, the theory is that spirits might be able to use the bits and pieces of sounds to kind of form their own communication, or just using that energy. And there's different ways to look at it, like maybe it's more of a technical thing inside a recorder. But it is I mean, there's a lot of research going on now about that kind of spirit box type thing. Like if you watch Kindred Spirits, they do a lot of spirit box stuff. And but in this session, when I'm using the Ouija board, which up to that point I'd never had any activity from the Ouija board, but I've got my hand on there and I'm asking questions, and I say, can you tell me what I'm touching? And I hoped to maybe have somebody say planchette, and you can hear something very electronically, almost robotic through the recording or through the spirit box saying Ouija board. It was
Wow.
super, super cool.
That is
And
so cool.
yeah, I've heard my name, which is really kind of weird when you hear your name. But I
Mhm.
also believe that, especially with the spirit box, but with all EVP, you can force yourself to hear things.
Mhm.
And so I'm open to criticism on, most of these, topics, but it's definitely fun. It's definitely fun to experiment with.
It's so fun. And I think that there's a lot to do with what you're using to record
Yeah.
because, the in these other dimensions, I mean, I don't even know how to talk about it anymore because I think we have so much information about consciousness and these other dimensions. But when you're in another dimension, I mean, you're operating through energy, it's all energy. It is right now too. It's just more dense. your energy. And so I found that the plugged in tape recorder was like ideal because it was this endless power source. And
Oh,
I tried,
yeah.
so yeah, and I'll tell you what, it's actually right here, no joke. I've had this forever, this little recorder, and it has a thing that hooks into it that's not hooked into it right now, that has battery. And I had gotten this because I had moved from tape recording readings to doing them on a USB.
Of course, yes.
Never was able to do it because the batteries were drained in the first like 3 minutes of every reading I ever did. And in fact, to this day, now I just tell people to record. We record on Zoom, or I have them record themselves, because my phone will drain, this will drain. They just drain batteries like crazy. However, this little guy can get really, really good recording. But if I use my phone, I'll never get anything. Like, it'll just never, ever happen. It just won't happen. And so I think it's interesting what you record with seems to get different results when you're trying for EVPs. But back in the day on the tape players, and I wish I had, and probably do have these recordings somewhere, but I did a seance every Halloween for years and years and years in my practice for my clients. And there was usually 10 to 20 people. It kind of depended on the year. And we'd all get together and we'd actually connect specifically with Nostradamus and Edgar Casey. I have a strong connection to both of them. And I'd call them in, and we had, I don't use the Ouija board because it does stress me out, but I do love the psychic circle. So for those of you that are interested in trying something, the psychic circle is really cool.
I totally bought that, by the way, just like last week.
Did you get it?
I did. I got it.
Have you used it yet?
I have not, but I have.
It's so good because it has all the astrological signs. It has numbers and letters. Like, it has just so much more on it. And it's also very light and colorful, but it has it actually works with the I Ching too. So you'll find that when you open up the box, like, it's so good. So what we would do is we would sit on the psychic circle board and we'd ask questions about the planet and what's going to happen. And one of those particular Halloweens predicted the tsunami that happened, the big one. And so it was really cool. But I would always record with my tape player just during the whole event. So I would just record, and then afterwards I play back. And once you get once you do get an EVP and you get voices, like, it's so freaky and cool at the same time. And just like you, I'm just as nerdy. I was like, oh my God, I got a voice. Like, listen to this. We'd be saying something and you play the tape recording back and it'd be like, Suzanne. And you'd be like, oh my God, you excited me. So it's so fun to like play with that stuff. And I remember taking this guy actually, and there's a castle, the Miramont Castle down south here from where I live. And I went to the castle and I was like walking around with this, like, while they're doing the tour. The people probably thought I was so crazy, but I was like, I want to see who's here, and I happen to be very blessed that I just can take pictures of spirit. And I wish I should have brought some. That's like a whole other show we need to do, Patrick, because I have a ton of pictures that I could show you of like spirit that I have taken, like a huge orb that's a gigantic smiley face on the Mirage building in Las Vegas when I was just walking down the street. And so I've got all these pictures. But anyways, I was taking pictures and like recording and all that stuff. And so EVPs are fun.
I'd love to add something to that, because you were talking about the battery being erased and all of that.
Yeah.
Especially in the time period where I was doing a lot of paranormal investigation with my team, the most popular way to be able to record the night vision video was using these vintage camcorders from the 90s that had Sony Night Shot, that had the 8mm little cassettes, and those are all dying in the world now and you can't find anymore. But for a long time that was really the only way you could go and get night vision, and that's just what investigators used. Well, I had 3 of those, and one night I was at the Belvoir Winery, which is an old Oddfellows home and an old orphanage from the late 1800s, early 1900s outside of Kansas City. And all of the paranormal shows have been there, and it's one of for example, Amy Bruni and Adam Berry from Ghost Hunters and Kindred Spirits. It's one of their favorite locations. And that night I happened to be lucky enough to be on investigation with them, and walking around investigating with them, and I have them on my video, and I'm already planning on how I'm going to do screenshots of Adam Berry and Amy Bruni in my, blog post about it, and so excited. And I have 3 videotapes of cool stuff and amazing things happening in that evening. And I even went through and watched some of it in my car that weekend before I left for home. And then that next day I went back because it was a 2-day event and did some more. And I got home that weekend and all 3 videotapes were white snow and completely erased. And I cannot figure it out. I've talked to both Adam and Amy about it, and they're like, oh my God, I have no idea. I was like, is this some kind of conspiracy? Did you guys have this magnetic thing and rub it around my camera because you didn't want to be on my camera, or what's up? So it's funny, on my blog post that next week, I drew my own screenshot of them in my, because I had to have something to post because I was so excited to be hanging out with Adam Berry and Amy Bruni. It's funny. I think that's a thing. I think they can, I think the energy is sometimes so powerful that our puny little 1990 camcorder technology just gets wiped out by their energy.
I so agree. And that's awful because it's the worst. I've had that happen too. Well, and I can't tell you how many of my poor clients that I love so much, think that they recorded the whole session and they're all excited and they go to play it and it's blank. And it's just a thing. And I'll be honest, I never talk about it because most people don't record their readings, really. I mean, it's every once in a while someone will want to record it. It's not very often. Most of my clients take notes, which I think is better anyways. But I almost don't know if it's supposed to be recorded. You're in this connection with the spirit and divine, and it's almost like recording it kind of does something about it. And I don't know what that is. I mean, I really don't, but I agree with you. I think it's definitely a thing of when you're not meant to document something with recordings, you're not meant to do it. And they won't let you. It just won't
And
happen.
maybe spirit saw my kind of what do you call it, my physical, I was being selfish with what I wanted to capture, or they were like, you just want to blog about this, so you're not getting your footage. maybe it was a materialistic kind of, I had the wrong intentions about that footage or something.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. You never know. You just never know what spirit wants to do. It's so crazy. I want to talk more about your investigations. I know you kind of shared why you started doing it, but what made you say, okay, I'm going to go on an investigation, and how did you even know what to do or what to do there?
That is kind of a controversial question in the community, because we are, when Ghost Hunters came out, there was an explosion of paranormal investigation that started, and lots of teams popped up all over the country and the world, really. And not always the greatest representation of the community. And sometimes it was teams who, only used the ghost shows as their research before jumping out there. And I can see how my group might have been confused as that group. But I did jump in with both feet before we jumped out there. And like I said, I was reading like crazy. I was reading about research, and yes, also using the TV shows as experience, but also following other groups that had been out there, because paranormal investigation groups go back way before Ghost Hunters for decades. But yes, it kind of exploded. And I'm a part of a big generation of paranormal investigators that kind of took that ghost hunters, inspiration and began. But it started as an interest, obviously, but I really wanted to help people. And that was my intention. I was embarrassed by a lot of the teams that jump out there and kind of like a group of rednecks, and they jump in their truck and they just kind of go out, there's always some big guy who's in charge, and it's just like, like I cringe. But I didn't want to just, a lot of teams would go out just for fun, and some would pay to investigate, and I've paid some places to investigate, but I waited for people to call and people to say I need help. And often it was just help that I was able to give in an email or over the phone. And a lot of those times an investigation wasn't needed because I found that they just wanted to know that someone listened to them and that they weren't crazy. And so that was cool. It didn't always need a paranormal investigation. And we didn't do a ton of paranormal investigations. I'm also a very reclusive person and enjoy my quiet personal space. And so that was, I didn't just jump out and investigate any place that contacted us. But then also, I think just things were so saturated around that time before we stopped doing investigations that people stopped calling. And I was like, well, we obviously aren't going to go out and just jump out and do. I didn't feel like we were that kind of group. And so even though looking back, there are things that I would have changed, like the name of our team was the Missouri Spirit Seekers. That name now makes me want to cringe. And I'm like, that is dorky. We had our black shirts, like all the teams had their black shirts. We had, when I speak, for library presentations or things like that, I always put up a picture on the screen of one of my group's first group photo was of us standing in a cornfield with our black shirts. So that was quality. That was a funny moment. But a combination of I was so serious about it that, just one investigation, because I am kind of a control freak and was the one that was the most interested in it. I took hours and hours and weeks and months doing investigation reports and putting together data and listening to audio and watching video and communicating back and forth with homeowners and businesses. And it just got tiring. I'm a teacher. I was doing that in my evenings and on the weekends. And I'm also, as I said, a very skeptic person. And so I would fight. Both sides of my brain would fight with each other about what was real and what wasn't. And then by the end of it, it was like there seemed to be very little paranormal that came out of it. And I was like, I can't do this forever anymore. And I was kind of burned out. And so when people stopped calling, I was like, I think my energy can best be put elsewhere. And so then I just jumped full time, not full time, but put all my energy into the blog or the podcast. And I tend to have more fun with it now than take it so seriously, because I did take it too seriously. And I, argued, I would jump into arguments about the paranormal and is that paranormal and is that real? And I can't do that anymore. I'm just like, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's super interesting. That was fun. And I move on. And so I guess, and I don't want to act like we had 500 investigations under our belt, because we did not. We, we were only out there for a couple of years, but I learned a lot and I had a lot of cool experiences, and my family enjoyed it. It was cool family time. They live about 3 hours away from me. So it was always fun to get together with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think we've got some more comments, but I have some thoughts about what you're saying too. Julie said, in lucid dreams, when I have a visitation from a being I'm not familiar with, I always say, if you are of God, you are welcome, and if not, leave now. And that is so poignant when we were talking about, you know, the negative energies, and our intention is absolutely, Julie, I agree. Like, if they're not of the light, if they're not of God, they need to leave. And actually, when you're doing house healings, that's one of the things that's really important to say. And so, you know, I want to say, like, with what you're talking about where it kind of phases out, you know, that's kind of what happened with me too, where I was doing a lot of house clearings, and you know, people paid me to come as a medium and see what was happening in their house and what was going on. And you know, and people who were struggling, you know, and they wanted to have their space cleared. And so a lot of my investigation experiences were really me going on site somewhere to see what was there. And there's a lot of shows about that too. There's a ton of shows where you can see, you can go on YouTube, watch 1,000 mediums going into houses and telling people what happened there. And it is really fascinating and it is really fun. But there is a point, like you're saying, where it's like, okay, you know, this, something about it you have to put away, you know, the energy kind of dies off. And so this brings me to a question that I don't know the answer to. I mean, I'm just kind of, it's like coming through me right now while we're talking, is what does paranormal investigation look like now? Because we are in this great awakening, right? And, you know, so many people are awakening up, awakening to the possibility that there's more than just them here. So it's not just some of us that are like kooky going and investigating, you know, haunted places, right? Like, it's everyone kind of looking at things differently. And you're seeing things differently, right? Just like you said, like, you do it differently. And I think, you know, you're making me think, God, it's really fun to go look at those places and go check out some place that has some energy. And maybe I kind of want to go do that. And I'm thinking, well, what does that look like? I wonder if you know, if you were to restart and you were to say, okay, 2020, you know, great clarity and vision, and this is how I do it today after all these interviews and shows and conversations, like, what would you do differently? What do you think it looks like now? What's the new age of the paranormal investigation?
That is such a great question. Well, first of all, I know from communicating with pioneers who have been in the paranormal investigation field for longer than the TV shows have, that, you know, the YouTube coming on the picture, or coming into the picture, with people being aware of techniques and being able to see it in media, has made people more open to it, I think, and willing to try and jumping out there. And that's also part of why you have not as much experience jumping out there. But it's becoming more common knowledge. I would have changed some of the, you know, me and a lot of teams, we shaped our team and used the same terminology as ghost hunters. And we, you know, the organization was the same, and I would have dropped all that. One of the coolest interviews I've ever had on my shows, by a woman named Barb Heiser, who is a wonderful woman and storyteller and paranormal investigator out of Illinois, who is also a social worker. And she talks about this idea of doing paranormal social work. And so she, you know, I would strive to be her if I jumped out and did this again. She combines paranormal investigation with this whole need to cross spirits over. Now, I have my own opinions on that. I don't think that every spirit needs to be crossed over, and I don't think that it's our place to tell a spirit they have to cross over, because they're their own person, you know, like we are. But she has some stories that are just tear jerkers, that are just, um her episode with me is amazing. And she is so, just the empathy and the love that her and her team have, and they're not just there for the homeowner or whatever. And of course they're there to help, but, you know, and we did this when I investigated. I was known to cry randomly in doing some of my EVP experiments. Even not having that intuition and not being a medium, there's just some things you feel and know. Like I can just feel that I was communicating with someone, and just asking, like, instead of asking, how many of you are here with me? What's your favorite color? Are you dead? Do you know you're dead? Blah, blah, blah. You know, ask them about their family, ask them about their passions, ask them, you know, like I I really would add more of that in, I guess. It wouldn't be about proving that something's paranormal. It would be about going in, because that's kind of more what it was before. I wouldn't be arguing and fighting for if something was or wasn't paranormal. It just is. And I would just enjoy things more and be there to help and take more of the social worker aspect of it. Um, that's probably what, and I would leave my black shirt at home.
Well, I love this idea of paranormal social work. I really love that. And you're right. You can't, it's really arrogant and quite frankly, I think irritating to spirits to basically be told to jump up and down and clap your hands and say this and do that. Like it's not organic. And I'm sorry, but when I'm not in this body anymore, I'm not going to tell you what my favorite color is just because you ask me. Like seriously, I mean seriously, it's very arrogant for us to think that you know, oh, do something, like make something happen. Well, how about you give them the energy and the space and the time to share what they want to share, you know? It's really important. And I'll tell you what, like, you know, I've been working as a medium for 15 years, and certainly since I was a little kid, you know, saw people on the other side and wasn't quite sure what to do. But after all this time and after all the work and after all of the client sessions that are so beyond, I mean, I'm blown away by the information myself, and I've been doing it for 15 years. Every time I do it, every time I connect with somebody who's passed, it's like, I don't know where it's coming from, really. I don't know that information, how I know. I mean, you can get into etheric RNA and DNA and the connection between the two and the communication, but ultimately it's just this thing that happens. And I really believe today that we do that work for them. It is not about you. It is not about the person who's grieving or the person who wanted to talk to their parent who passed or any of that. It is about them, because they don't have the opportunity to tell you to your face what they needed to say, what they needed to feel, what needed to happen. And so I'm really doing this work for them now. It's not about a person in the present time linear reality. And not everybody wants that. You know, everybody wants predictions of the future and psychic readings, but the people who do come and really want to connect with a loved one, like those loved ones want to connect with them. They want to speak their truth and have closure and tell that person that they were at their wedding. Like they want to do that. And it's so important. So when you talk about paranormal social work, I think, wow, that's like so big. That's like big. That's like a whole other show. That's a whole other book. That's a whole, right? Like that's huge. And I agree with you with the crossing over. You know, there's been a whole lot of discussion about that because of how many people are leaving the planet right now. And I'll tell you what, like in all the years I've done this, there are very few souls that aren't crossed over. And there was a whole big deal made about it and books written about it. And, oh, we're crossing everyone over. And it's very rare that someone's actually stuck because out of their control. You know, people choose to stay or not to leave or to be in that environment. And yes, there's post-traumatic death syndrome. And yes, that's a real thing, but it's not like every single person I talk to needs to be crossed over. It's like not a thing. And I actually read something. Are you familiar with April Crawford, who channels Veronica?
I don't think so.
Oh, she's awesome. You should check her out. Everybody should check her out. Her name's April Crawford. She channels a group of beings, a collective called Veronica, and she's so awesome. I've actually had readings with her. I've followed her for quite a long time. She's really, really awesome. But she said recently in a newsletter that because somebody was asking about people dying alone. And I've been sort of in my own space about what I thought about that. And one of her messages was, everyone chooses to leave alone or to not leave alone. It's part of their soul contract. It's part of what they choose to do. And when they do leave, if they are alone, spirit takes over. We don't have to move them from place to place. Like, there's a whole lot more happening behind the scenes that we just haven't been able to see. And then the other thing I want to say, and it should be all about you, and I'm like totally talking about me, but you are psychic, Patrick. Like, you are psychic. Everyone is psychic. Everyone is a psychic. Everyone is a medium. You know what? We all have muscles, and I'm sorry, but I'm not a triathlete, right? Like, it's a muscle that has to be worked, and you have to work it and practice and practice. And you're doing that with what you're doing. When you talk about feeling and knowing and those tears of emotion, those are tears of truth. And so I hope like, we all sit at the same table, and we all have those same experiences as human beings. And we are stepping into the freaking Lion's Gate today at 8:00 p.m. Mountain Time, 4 a.m. in Giza. And part of this particular Stargate is the release of false reality and the ability to step into an interdimensional way of being. And so everyone who's listening, and you, Patrick, and me, and everybody, our ability to connect with those interdimensional realities will be even stronger when we wake up tomorrow than they were today. So don't ever discount your gifts, Patrick, because you wouldn't be doing this if they weren't your gifts.
I have wonderful friends and listeners in my life who remind me that often, and I just apologize that people have to remind me that. You know what I'm saying? I do. I know what you're saying. It comes from a place of, I guess, and you and I talked about this before we even went live today. The first part of my journey, I started the journey kind of upside down. I hit like, I wanted to channel. Like, here I am first learning about this world, and I was like, oh, look, there's this thick book about channeling. Let me read that, and I'm going to try it home. And then I was trying astral projection, and I was trying to move things with my mind and everything. And it's like, girl, you are going to need to take a step back and start with like a pendulum or and so I tried really, really hard, and I wanted to be a medium so badly, and went to a few classes, and it wasn't happening like I thought it would. And so that's where a lot of that comes from, I guess. I mean, I know that that's not what I'm meant to be on this planet. Is the great medium.
Well, you never know, and you're shining a light on it, and that is a perfect, amazing thing. And it's appreciative of everyone, that you're doing this work, truly. And I could honestly talk to you, like, an hour has flown by, of course, and I could talk to you forever. I mean, I hope you come back on. I hope we keep talking about this, because I feel like we literally talked about one thing, and there's like 100 things that we could talk about with the paranormal, because there's so much. There's the photos and the voices, but there's also, the knocking and the experiences and the energies that sit in places. I mean, my God, like, we could talk about the Stanley Hotel and my experiences there. And oh my gosh. So I hope this is the first of quite a few visits to Buddhist Biohacker.
It was a pleasure to be on the show, and I agree. I would love to come back and talk about so many more things. And just thanks. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So much love to you. And you guys have been such a great audience, so many great questions and comments and shares. And I love that too. And so thank you so much for sharing. And we do have our Lionsgate ceremony tonight at 8 p.m. It's free for everybody. The Zoom link is actually up on my website, lisamgunshore.com or ajatakasha.com. So you can just go there, and we will be working with the grids around the planet tonight. The Stargate is open from 8 p.m. to 8:20 4:20 p.m. Mountain Time. That's 4 a.m. to 4:20 a.m. in Giza. That's when dawn and the sunlight comes up on the Sphinx, and the activation of the ancient technology of the pyramids is happening. So that's why we're doing it at that time. So that's happening. And Patrick, tell everybody, I want to give you some space. Tell everybody how to find your channel. I know we're going to put this in the show notes, but let everyone know how to find you, how to find your channel, what's your website, like how do they get in touch with you?
Awesome. Thank you for that. First of all, big shout out to Julie. You rock. Thanks for putting us in, getting us connected. But I can also, my focus is on a podcast. And so I always direct people to my site, bigseance.com. And I also have a YouTube channel. And so my podcast is also directed to my YouTube channel, but you know, it's not my moving face on it. It's just a logo and the audio is there. But I'm on pretty much any podcast player, any directory out there. It's the Big Séance podcast, bigseance.com. And I'm, you know, I'm on Instagram, but I feel like I'm too old to get Instagram. Facebook is really a big hub for me, and that's where I feel like most of my community is. And we have a group called the Big Séance Parlor in Facebook where it gets real nerdy. I love that group. I've learned so much from people in that group. We have lots of psychic mediums in that group. You know, we have healthy skeptics in that group. I've never needed a moderator and I just let it go. It's awesome. So if you're interested in that, check that out too. Awesome. You rock, Lisa. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you rock. I mean, really, like, we really just scratched the surface. I'm sure everybody out there that does this knows that, but like, we just have only begun. My God, the stories that I'm sure we could tell each other.
Well, and it's interesting because I have always felt like I sit on a fence of two worlds. There's kind of this spiritual world and there's a paranormal world that sometimes I see as differently. And I'm hanging out in both spaces. There are some of my friends that are just in one space or just the other space. So it's interesting to kind of have this crossover kind of thing for me.
Yeah, for sure. It's once you start doing it, you can't stop because there's just too much cool stuff. And thank you, Julie. She was saying in our comments, this has been great. Patrick is amazing. And thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Julie. And we are back live. You guys, we have one more podcast this week. Oh my gosh. Tomorrow at 1:00 Mountain Time, Julie Hoyle is live talking about her brand new book. She is at the forefront of shadow work on this planet. So I'm pretty excited. So come with your questions for her and come hear her stories and just listen to her talk, because I could just listen to her talk for days and days because it's so great. So, and Patrick, this has been just a joy. I mean, really a joy. And let's do this really soon and talk more about all sorts of stuff. I know we were talking about remote viewing off air, and I think this is only the beginning. So thank you so much.
I'm there. Just tell me.
Yeah, let's do it. And thank you guys for listening and watching. Big day today. So this is a special day and a special guest. Thank you, Patrick. And thank you, everybody out there. And we will see you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye.